I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up.
The war remains a stain on our collective conscience. Day after day, year after year.
4 years of fighting. The UN weighs the tolls of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and pushes for a ceasefire.
What we've seen, of course, across many years now is this marked rise in the number of conflicts globally.
Navigating growing humanitarian needs in a turbulent world. A conversation with a permanent observer for the International Committee of the Red Cross. Building resilience on the front lines of the climate crisis. How one small island is preparing for the future. Next.
We need an immediate, full, and unconditional ceasefire. This war needs to finally end. And let me also reiterate, any peace agreement must be grounded in the UN Charter, international law, and the General Assembly resolutions, meaning respect the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence of Ukraine.
This week marked 4 years of conflict between Russia and Ukraine. General Assembly President Annalena Baerbock among those commenting on the ongoing fighting. Both the General Assembly and the Security Council held sessions on the conflict and the efforts to bring peace to the region. Nick Harper is monitoring that and other key stories here at the UN.
Another year, another anniversary. 4 years of fighting in Ukraine have left immeasurable scars. For the United Nations Security Council, the 4-year mark was a time to reflect.
Day after day, year after year, we have witnessed the cascading consequences of this blatant violation of international law, including the UN Charter.
The UN's political chief called the conflict a stain on our collective conscience. Several rounds of peace talks between Ukraine, Russia, and the US have so far failed to yield a breakthrough, leading China's ambassador to the UN this week to urge the countries to seize the positive momentum to find a diplomatic solution.
4 years into the Ukraine crisis, the situation has come to a critical juncture. Recently, key stakeholders have conducted multiple rounds of engagement. With a deepening negotiation process, calls for peace have grown stronger, and the prospect for a political solution is now on the horizon. On the other hand, we witness continued hostilities, rising civilian casualties, and a deeply worrying humanitarian situation.
In the General Assembly, UN members held a symbolic vote, adopting a resolution supporting lasting peace in Ukraine. But Ukraine maintains Russia is not serious about ending the conflict.
Russia continues to demonstrate no genuine willingness to stop this aggression. Just throughout 1 week, from 8th to 15th February 2026, Russia launched about 1,300 attack drones, more than 1,200 guided aerial bombs, and 50 missiles against Ukraine, most of them ballistic.
Russia pushed back, accusing Ukraine of only looking for a truce as a breather to strengthen its military.
It is clear that Kyiv, facing serious difficulties on the front line as well as dwindling support from its Western sponsors, is primarily interested in a pause so that it can regroup and rearm.
Ukraine has undoubtedly dominated the UN this week in discussions, meetings and briefings. But away from here, UN agencies on the ground have also spent the week considering 4 years of conflict. UN shelters and field kitchens dot Ukrainian cities, including in the capital Kyiv. The UN estimates Moscow has now destroyed 65% of Ukraine's energy generation capacity, making the bitter winter months even harder.
I must say, as I travel around the country, I can see increasing fatigue. People are getting tired of this, of course, understandably. We want to see that the fifth year will bring lasting peace, a ceasefire and lasting peace with dignity.
In Geneva, another anniversary. The Human Rights Council this week marked its 20th anniversary. The UN Secretary-General used it as a chance to warn about the challenges that threaten the Council's work.
Human rights are under a full-scale attack around the world. The rule of law is being outmuscled by the rule of force. And this assault is not coming from the shadows or by surprise. It is happening in plain sight and often led by those who hold the greatest power.
Guterres also said it was more than past time to end the bloodshed in Ukraine. As another anniversary passes, Ukrainian civilians continue to suffer, leaving the UN to denounce the fighting and help how it can, as world powers still struggle to find an end to the conflict. Nick Harper, CGTN, at the UN in New York.
UN agencies are working to get more humanitarian aid to people in Sudan. The country is the site of the world's largest displacement crisis.
We continue to be very concerned by the deteriorating humanitarian situation, notably in North Darfur State, and by the reports of continuing drone attacks in North Kordofan State. In the northwest of North Darfur, the continuing escalation of violence in the Teen area of the Sudan-Chad border is forcing civilians to flee to safety in eastern Chad, and it's constraining our ability to access for humanitarian access.
Fighting has intensified in Sudan, leaving more civilians caught in the middle. The conflict started back in April of 2023, and since then, more than 40,000 people have been killed and millions have been displaced. Several areas of Sudan are now facing famine, and the humanitarian concerns are mounting.
Our humanitarian partners are calling for rapid and flexible funding, as well as rapid, safe, and unhindered access for humanitarian goods to scale up water and sanitation services in Tawila and to prevent a further deterioration of the public health conditions there. This year's humanitarian response plan calls for $2.9 billion to reach more than 20 million people across Sudan.
Both structural factors such as poverty, weak institutions, and social exclusion, and situational factors like armed violence contribute to an environment where children are increasingly at risk of being trafficked by gangs. They are either enticed by what they perceive as power, social status, or protection, or lured through violence, threats, food, or drugs.
A new UN report raises concerns about children being trafficked by gangs that control large parts of Haiti. There are 26 gangs currently operating in the Caribbean nation, and most are engaged in trafficking. Children who have been displaced by the violence in the country are among those at greatest risk of being trafficked. The report points to several strategies that could help keep more children out of the hands of gangs.
The report calls for a comprehensive human rights center strategy built around 7 pillars: expanding social protection programs for vulnerable families in the capital, reinforcing schools as protective spaces, developing child-friendly spaces outside schools, increasing youth vocational and employment opportunities, strengthening rights-compliant law enforcement, prioritizing rehabilitation over punishment, and improving accountability for child traffickers.
Science-led governance is not a brake on progress. It is an accelerator for solutions, a way to make progress safer, fairer, and more widely shared. It helps us identify where AI can do the most good the fastest. And it helps us anticipate impacts early, from risks for children to labor markets to manipulation at scale, so countries can prepare, protect, and invest in people.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed the need for a multilateral approach to AI oversight. He made remarks on the sidelines of the recent AI Impact Summit in New Delhi. The Secretary General called for international guardrails for AI that will benefit all and leave no one behind. Let's take a look at some of the other issues on the UN's agenda.
So malnutrition is deepening. In 2026, we'll have over 1.8 million children under the age of 5 facing acute malnutrition, and with half of these expected to face severe malnutrition. And these are really alarming numbers for a country the size of Somalia.
Conflict, drought, and soaring food prices are contributing to rising levels of hunger in Somalia. 6.5 million people are now facing acute food insecurity. That's about a third of the country's population. The UN's Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator got a first-hand look at the situation in South Sudan this week. Recent surges in fighting have triggered mass displacement in the country. Fighting is also disrupting medical services and efforts to deliver aid. Judges at the International Criminal Court are deciding whether a case against former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte will proceed to trial. Duterte is accused of crimes against humanity, linked to his notorious crackdown on drugs during his presidency.
Coming up.
We need to step up our efforts, especially in emergency response, where intensity is rising and the needs therefore as well.
UN Insider.
I see a country on the move.
There's my opportunity.
Is it good to change so fast?
Yes, but it's a challenge.
We have one foot in the future.
But we never forget our past.
We need to talk to one another.
And listen.
More than 1 billion voices telling their stories. Rediscovering China, only on CGTN. "360-degree profiles of industry movers and shakers, tech mavericks, and policymakers. We drill down on their success. We ask how they set strategy and how they navigate in an increasingly competitive market. Real talk, real business. Join the conversation. Biz Talk, only on CGTN.
Whether it's about your education, the home you live in, or the items you buy, your money has a story to tell. Because every business story is a human story. Global Business.
With dozens of active conflicts around the world, humanitarian relief organizations are more critical than ever. But those organizations are facing challenges, including funding hurdles. I sat down with Elise Moschini. She is the permanent observer for the International Committee of the Red Cross. Well, already this year, there are more than 120 conflicts, perhaps more, going on around the globe. Tell us about some of the top priorities, especially given some of the financial and budget challenges that everyone seems to be experiencing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we've seen, of course, across many years now is this marked rise in the number of conflicts globally. The ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, being an actor that is principally focused on working in conflict, both in a very direct way, rendering assistance on the ground, but also in our dialogue with the parties to conflict. We feel stretched just as any other humanitarian actor would feel stretched right now with the rising needs, but we're absolutely doubling down and committing to lean in as we need to step up our efforts, especially in emergency response, where intensity is rising and the needs therefore as well.
Tell us more about the ICRC humanitarian outlook for 2026. What are some of the key points there?
Well, as I said, first it's that stretch, how to manage that as part of the humanitarian community and with the very distinctive role that the International Committee of the Red Cross plays. Stepping a bit back from that in the individual conflicts in which we work is also watching certain trends that have us frankly really concerned. Apart from scale, then you also have what we consider to be a real rise in the brutality of how wars are fought and the toll that is taken on civilian lives. I mean, people read the UN statistics that are put out. For example, you cited 120, we would say 130 even by now, conflicts around the world. UN cites a 40% rise in the number of civilian casualties in just 1 year. It's really staggering. And when you see that, but when you also underlay it with what we see as certain trends around dehumanization, and so really this othering of the enemy, which is so difficult to come back from, when we see also the turning away from limits of war and the questioning of this really poses more fundamental questions for humanity, not to mention humanitarian workers themselves being targeted increasingly.
And you hear and read some of these stories. It's hard to believe that these things still happen and happening as we speak.
Well, we would definitely be surprised about that. We should be surprised, and we should be doing everything we can to turn that trend around. Of course, for the International Committee of the Red Cross being at the origins of the Geneva Conventions, which are the laws which do govern the way wars are fought and aim to protect people from the worst horrors of war. These conventions are universally agreed by all states. And you would hope that these limits that are set are observed in reality on the ground in conflicts. What we're seeing on a more positive, if we can try to turn that positive, is that states are leaning in at this moment and recognizing that the trends and the slide of contact is something that they can't accept, and states leaning in very specific ways to turn that around.
Because there's this initiative, if I can get you to tell us a little bit more about that. It's the global initiative to galvanize political commitment to international humanitarian law, something that was put into place a few years ago, but culminating this year.
Exactly, right. So when I speak about the very specific steps that states are taking, it's this initiative, which is in effect a call by 6 states, China among them, who recognize this trend and the danger of this slide and where it would take us if we don't stand up again, is states coming together to say we need to uphold the rules of war. We need to have this commitment be taken at a political level to prevent violations from happening in the first place, but to bring peace back when it has fallen away. And so these 6 states have come together and called upon all world leaders and all states to join that effort. Today we have about just over a year after the initiative was launched, 100 states joining that call formally. We have 27 states who are working specifically to develop really actionable recommendations to see how in practice compliance with the rules of war can be strengthened. What we look forward to at the end of this year, as you said, the whole effort will culminate. It's not the end of anything because we want this to carry forward, but the Kingdom of Jordan will host a conference to uphold humanity in war.
You mentioned, some of the statistics that are very startling, the rise in the number of deaths of civilians. Can you talk to us a little bit about starvation as a tactic, as a weapon of war?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before getting all the way to that extreme of starvation as a tactic of war, just to recognize what hunger looks like in conflict. And I think as we look around the world today, you need no other example than Sudan, one of the largest humanitarian crises in the world, and where we see hunger at scale. You see 20 million people, half of the country's population, in acute food insecurity. And to see what that means as a human experience, especially in a country that is so fertile, right, where so much of the population depends on agriculture and livestock for their well-being. All the ingredients are there for people to be able to live, and yet you have hunger on this scale. You have it overlaid with other violations of war, with rape, with targeting of medical facilities. And if you put this picture together, what you see is all of these phenomenon that we witness in conflict are not inevitable, right? You don't have to see these things in conflict. And that's exactly what the rules of war are meant to guard against, is to see that not only that health facilities are protected, that civilians are not targeted, but very specific rules in the conventions to prevent the use of starvation as a weapon of war, and very specific provisions around, for example, protecting food stocks, protecting agricultural lands, everything that the population just depends upon for their basic survival today and then for the future when peace is brought back.
We see this political will from all of these different countries working together, but for the average person seeing this and learning about what is still taking place, what can they do?
Well, I mean, I think at a really basic level, what we hope that this resonates in people's minds with is when you recognize that the laws of war, it seems very high-minded, it seems very far away from many people's lives, thank goodness. Too many people, it's the daily reality, right? How wars are fought and the laws that are meant to protect them. But what underpins all of these rules is very fundamental, right? It's very human-centered. It's based in our common humanity. And so for people to recognize that, and to stand up for these values themselves and in their own lives, and to see that slide into brutality, and to act against it, to speak against it, to speak to your political leaders, for example, but also in your own sphere, to know that there are limits to how wars are fought. There shouldn't be any space in the world that is beyond limit.
Elise Moschini, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much,
UN Insider.
The last 11 years have been the 11 hottest on record. Rising global temperatures bring stronger storms and more frequent extreme weather events. One Caribbean island that has suffered major damage from hurricanes is trying to make changes to become more climate resilient.
Dominica, the nature isle of the Caribbean. An island of 72,000 people that boasts lush volcanic mountains, waterfalls, and incredible biodiversity. But it's also on the front lines of the climate crisis. In September 2017, Hurricane Maria, a Category 5 storm, tore across the island. It left a trail of devastation. 90% of buildings damaged, infrastructure shattered, lives changed forever.
In the space of a few hours, Maria wiped out 225% of Dominica's GDP. We are on the front line of the battle against climate change. From the seeds of Maria's destruction grew my administration's policy initiatives and actions to build the first climate resilient nation in the world.
Dominica's first line of defense? Emergency public shelters like this one, designed not just to withstand storms, but to serve as critical safe zones during and after a disaster. The $7 million project is being completed with support from the World Bank. Hurricane Maria left thousands homeless. In response, Dominica launched the Housing Recovery Project, building homes with stronger roofs and proper anchoring to withstand Category 5 storms. This complex in Bellevue, Chopin is a model community built to accommodate hundreds of displaced families.
Hurricane Maria, everything I had was gone, the whole house, nothing left. Everything was gone.
Vanya Williams and her husband Ted survived the eye of the storm.
It was sad. I went on the road walking. People was holding me. I was crying, saying I lose everything. I did not get anything. My husband had a chainsaw. We had a whole fridge, settee, everything was gone. It's good. I cannot complain. Very good.
You feel safe, secure?
It's safe, yes. Safe, secure.
New stormwater drains are under construction, and emergency water tanks are in place to supply clean drinking water to impacted communities. Another painful lesson from Maria was that when roads are washed out, communities get cut off from relief. In the aftermath, road resilience has become a top government priority. To better prepare for threatening storms, Dominica has developed an early warning system of weather stations that track rainfall, wind, river levels in real time. From village loudspeakers to SMS alerts, communities are notified long before disaster strikes. And with new roads and shelters, people in harm's way can find safe haven more easily.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN insider.